So our next speaker is Jules Pemberton. He's CEO of NRW Holdings. NRW Holdings was founded in Kalgoorlie in 1994, and since that time has grown to become one of the leading civil and mining contractors in the Australian resources and infrastructure sectors, with an order book exceeding $2 billion and a workforce of over 2,000. Jules has been with NRW since 1996, joining when the company workforce was circa 20 people, and has served in various site and head office-based roles. Prior to becoming the managing director and CEO in 2010, Jules was the group COO, served on the board as an executive director since 2006, and has played an integral role in the then private company path to listing on the ASX in 2007. Jules was a founder and executive director of Promac Rental and Sales, which NRW acquired in 2006. Welcome.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you all for being in attendance. For those of you who stayed in the room, I'm not the warm-up act for Ken over there. We've got a great business to tell you about. Look, I want to start by thanking the conference organisers. For us to be one of only two presenters in the mining services space this year is a real privilege, and I really appreciate the invitation for us to be able to talk about our business. Now, I'm actually going to cover really the history of NRW. You've heard a little bit of it in the introduction, but we have been around for nearly 25 years. Started out, a lot of my early history was in the goldfields, so we have a pretty special connection to the goldfields. And when we get to the disclaimer, my voice, by the way, if I start coughing, is not from 2 days in Kalgoorlie. I flew in today, so it's a bit of man flu, but I'll get through it. So for those of you that don't know our history, I'll take you back to our beginnings back in Kalgoorlie. So as you can see from the picture up on the left, tells an interesting story of one of our earlier projects, D6. So one of our first contracts was a tailings dam at the Granny Smith mine, and we generally used to push the tailings up and roll them, and that was the early days of contracting in NRW, tailings lift at the Granny Smith mine. D6 Swampia roll is all we needed, which is good because it's pretty much all we had back then. More opportunities followed throughout Kalgoorlie. Bulk Earthworks project at Bulong, which is actually my first project, the one up on the top right there, where everyone did everything. You drove every machine, you did the paperwork at night, and drove them home. I actually did a 6 and 1, and I thought that was a pretty good roster in those days, but it was actually 6 months on, one weekend off. Didn't realise you actually do a 13 and 1, 13 weeks and 1, which actually was a really good roster in those days. But our reputation for civil delivery on the mining side grew quite quickly, and following a tailings dam we did at Kanowna Belle, our reputation continued to grow. And the quality of work we were delivering in those days gave us opportunities on the mining side too. So we were a mining contractor quite some time ago, and again, people that are not familiar with the history of the business, I'll take you through some of that today. We got an opportunity to take a ramp out, a very high grade ramp in the bottom of the pit at Kanowna Belle. And then ultimately won a crusher feed contract, and the crusher feed contract ended up being materials haulage to the Stopes Underground contract. And these are how NRW's grown its opportunities, being very collaborative with its clients, and just growing our opportunities through our good work. And over the next few years, we managed to secure miscellaneous services, multi-year miscellaneous services contracts at Kanowna Belle, at Darlot. We did a whole bunch of work at Paddington, amongst others in the goldfields. So being up here today and presenting is a bit like coming home. I mean, I haven't been to Cal for a while, haven't been to Diggers for a few years, but just when you touch, you land off a short flight from Perth, you kind of get that feeling you've come home again. And obviously there's many establishments in Kalgoorlie where I've had a drink or two on a night out as well, so a great place. But going towards the next phase of our career, the late 90s into the 2000s, quite a challenging time in the goldfields. Obviously commodity prices change, nothing ever stays the same. Despite the fact that we were doing less in Kalgoorlie at that point in time, we actually bought a business up in Newman, a very small contracting business. Some of the first things we did were cleaning up under BHP's conveyor lines at Mount Wildback with a little six-wheel tip truck, a bobcat, and it was pretty great work in those days for us actually to be somewhere else, getting another opportunity, and the majors actually did a lot of their own earthworks in those days. So BHP did all their own railway line work, they did a lot of their own work, and that sort of time, some of the shift had already happened to mining services contractors in the contracting side, but on the civil side, that entry to Newman at that point in our kind of history was a pretty important one. But things were stirring, and as you can see from some of the photos there, the involvement that we've had in a lot of the producers, particularly in the north, and also obviously some of the other producers there, Fortescue Rail, Brockman, some of the early works for BHP, and also Yandi, which that project on the top right was a project where I'm not quite sure, we were turning over probably 60 million that year, and we sat in front of the Rio guys and they said, well, we've got this project we want you to do. It's $94 million. Do you think you guys can handle it? And being a contractor of that size at that point in time, to be entrusted to build some critical infrastructure for them, clearly the business was starting to do some good work. So what most of you in the room would probably know us for, whether investors, clients, or our peers, is our involvement in the expansions over that 2004 to 2014 period. And in our nearly 25-year history, it's without question been the largest contributor to our business to date. I say to date. So, sorry. So it's interesting when you look at a slide like this, because this is an unusual presentation. Obviously, our financials get released in a couple of weeks' time, so I'm not talking about the financial side of the business. But when you actually look at some of the things that we've done, what the company's done, up against the backdrop of a material spend that's coming back into the Pilbara. Now, the majors haven't done anything for a long time. There's been some smaller sustaining projects happening in the Pilbara. We've done a little bit of work for some of the others, the emerging lithium players in the region. But what we've actually achieved over the years is quite phenomenal. Also, most recent announcement, which I'll touch on briefly to give you some sort of a backdrop. So, multi-billion-dollar investment program coming back into the Pilbara in our kind of historical heartland. We also picked up a $176 million project with BHP on South Flank, which is one of the early, obviously, bulk earthworks and development contracts. So we talk about a few highlights. 900 kilometres of railway line we built through the Pilbara. That's Perth, Kalgoorlie, not quite back again, maybe a bit past Southern Cross, but it kind of puts into context of what we've built. And I think I stand to be corrected, someone will probably know this exact fact. I think there's about 2,500 k's of rail in the Pilbara, which obviously crisscrosses from various producer. But to be involved in the formation development, we don't do the track laying side of things, but actually building that formation throughout the Pilbara is quite some feat. 500 kilometres of permanent roads. Now, these aren't whole roads, they're not in-pit roads, they are permanent roads built to main road standards that we built over that period of time. 100 kilometres of conveyor line. Again, depending on if there's a rail line out there or not, at a shorter distance, there's conveyor lines. Again, multiple projects, multiple clients. 5 airstrips. As things grow, more people need to get in there. Again, we've built a lot of airstrips in the region. On to the next slide, 5 million cubic metres we've put into tailings dams. 55 major bulk earthworks packages, and involving 120 million BCM of movement and placement of material. So it's not just dumping it and tipping it in one spot in the waste dump or anything, it's actually managing it, conditioning it, placing it. So it's quite a phenomenal number. Unfortunately, the concrete number doesn't sound quite as big, as impressive as it is, but we'll work on that. 180,000 cubic metres of concrete and 4 major port developments. There's everything from FMG, Rio and BHP. We've been involved in all of their expansions. But essentially, the business has contributed to what the majors now collectively produce is hundreds of millions of tonnes of iron ore. It's produced and sold into the market annually, and we've been a part of that development and that construction phase. So against the current backdrop, it's a pretty interesting thing to go back and just kind of remind ourselves of what we do. One of the key things we did, obviously the market slowed down quite dramatically over the recent years, is actually hold on to our civil business. A lot of competitors actually, go from job to job when there's no work, they don't do anything. We held on to a very small crew. We did 30 million in our civil business in the Pilbara in 2016, which is what we were doing every fortnight in the peak in 2012. So to give you kind of a sense of the scale of what we were, where we went back to, and now obviously with this investment coming back into the Pilbara, we're going to significantly grow that business. Also during that period, we established a drill and blast business in 2010, and that was a group of ex-Brandrel guys. I think Osdrill bought Brandrel, and a bunch of the guys came across to us. We gave them a whole bunch of shiny new drills, and off they went, and that's been a very successful business for us, and obviously a great contributor to the group. And we also bought a maintenance services business. It's a mechanical workshop in Perth that we actually did acquire prior to our IPO. So our geographical presence grew with coal contracts in Queensland. I mean, we had a very Pilbara-centric business for a period of time. We'd left the goldfields, not done a lot back here, and gone to the Pilbara side of things. So we'd been busy. We needed to actually look at the East Coast and look at what we were doing in the West and see if we could translate to the East. And as NRW, we won a mining contract, which had been there since 2011 with Middlemount. But also during that period, we were offshore with Rio Tinto in Guinea, our main offshore development phase from sort of 2006 to 2012. I suppose despite the growth in the workforce during that period, our business peaked at 5,000 people. We've currently got 2,000, as you'll see in a slide in a couple of moments, and peaked revenue around 1.4. I mean, what really hasn't changed is the culture, and I think as you look through, talking about our history and talking about what we've done in the Pilbara and how closely we're associated with the producers and whether the producers are, gold, lithium, iron ore. The contractors are very close partners. We like to think, our culture still remains the same in a lot of ways, and I think Jake touched on it previously as well about the importance of your people and valuing your people. We've always been a very collaborative contractor and are very proud of the delivery record of us, which we've talked about before. So that's kind of the history lesson. So thanks for bearing with me on that. I want to talk about some of the projects we're working on at the moment. Sorry, before I get to that, what do we look like today? I mean, this is a snapshot that gives you a bit of a picture as to what the business looks like today. We have had a couple of successful acquisitions that we've made in the last 18 months, and they're obviously contributing to some of the success we've recently had. But we're currently at a record order book, 2.2 billion, and 950 million of that is already secured for delivery in FY19. Again, going back to the example of just a few short years ago, it's more than 3 or 4 times the size of the run rate where we were just 3 short years ago. But the difference this time around is that we're more diversified by client, by commodity, and service capability at any time. I'll talk a bit more about the acquisitions in a moment, but just to give you a snapshot, that's the sort of current picture of the business. We will be recruiting, obviously, for some of the projects we have ahead of us, and we'd expect those workforce numbers to grow quite significantly over the next 12 months. So on to the summary of our projects. Our traditional Pilbara-focused business, as I said, went down to quite a low level, around 30 million a year in 2016. Has continued to deliver for particularly people like Rio Tinto and FMG on any of their sustaining or operations projects. The good thing is there has been competitive tension, but we've been very successful and picked up nearly every single job that's gone in that particular space during that period. And again, obviously you've got to be price competitive, but it comes back to the delivery capability, safety and all the other things that need to be considered when you're delivering for these clients. South Flank, obviously, a new contract for us. We're mobilising there in September, and that'll be a great platform for us to actually grow with some of the other projects that are coming up with the other majors. FMG have obviously got a sustaining tonnes program, and also Rio Tinto as well with Koodaideri. What we sort of think at the moment, just on that bottom point, there's probably around $2.5 billion worth of work directly addressable by us. So this is earthworks, concrete work, which we could do over the next number of years. Obviously, we're not suggesting we're going to win every single job, but that's the sort of size of the market that's there over the next 3 to 4 years, which wasn't there previously, and that's excluding the South Flank project there. In South Australia, this has been a great opportunity for us. We picked up 111 million ECI with Oz Minerals. In August last year, we worked closely with our client on delivery of that infrastructure. The aerodrome's finished now, and we're pretty busy on plant-side earthworks and moving on to other areas. The pleasing thing, again, it comes back to reputation and the history of the business. We were actually approached on the basis of our expertise in remote delivery to look at helping them on this project. you don't get that often. And I mean, that actually also marks our first contract in South Australia as well. So really very pleasing outcome for us that our boys are delivering there. So on to some of the other projects. We're involved in the Forestfield Airport Link project. We're a 20% share of the joint venture with Cellini and Progilio, which is Italy's largest contractor. World-class projects on track for delivery in 2020, and was the first major public infrastructure project that we got involved in to sort of change and look at diversity across our business. There's around $7 billion of infrastructure projects planned for construction across Perth, a lot of it in rail, new rail links around Metronet. So pretty interesting times coming up for Perth, as well as its infrastructure development outside of the Pilbara. Our mining business, Middlemount Coal, which I mentioned briefly earlier on, we've been operating since 2011. It's our largest fleet by asset value. It's been going very well. We've also got a 5-year contract here in WA with Altura, and we've recently secured a 6-year mining contract with Dalgaranga at Gascoyne. Important for us because it takes us back into the gold space. It was a key sort of area for us to get back into. It's been dominated by a couple of our peers over the last few years, but pretty important for us to make sure we keep that connection in the gold space, and again also for commodity diversity as well. Onto the drill and blast business, to give you a quick snapshot of what we're doing there. We have 2 lithium contracts in WA, been at Greenbushes since 2011. So we've had pretty experience with the material over the years. And obviously they'll hope to play a part with future expansions that not only that client but other clients are planning. On the gold side, we're supporting, so the other lithium one is for supporting our mining business at Altura. And then we also have Dalgaranga in gold, which is also being done by ADB. So on the East Coast, I'll talk a bit about that acquisition in a minute. We have 10 contracts in Queensland, mainly in the coking and thermal coal space, and 3 contracts in New South Wales. So at the moment, we've got around, we're certainly the largest production drilling contractor on the East Coast, with 64 drills operating and around 17 projects. So coming to the company's transformation over the last 12 months, I mean, obviously we've grown significantly as suggested by our order book and our work in hand. A lot of that came off the back of the acquisition of Golding, which we did September last year. We knew the business well, and I looked at the business not long after we IPO'd, actually in 2017. Loved the culture of the business, loved the quality of the business. We were outbid by Champ by a number that was several $100 million more than what we paid for it. We paid 85 million, and I think at the time the business went for about 320. The good thing is that Champ actually looked after the business. You know, they didn't kind of implode it. The same management team was there. The quality in that leadership and the quality of delivery was still the same. So great acquisition for us. It's got 75 years of history of delivery. So for us to come along and say, well, we're NRW, we'll stamp the NRW stamp over the top. You know, it's quite different operating in WA as it is to Queensland. So we wanted to keep the Golding name. It's got a very good name in Queensland and New South Wales, and that's really what we did. 75 years of history versus ours in 25 as well. So a very pleasing acquisition. So what it did was just double the size of our business and brought considerable strategic benefit to the group, quite a different delivery operation. So it's got 3 divisions: civil, mining, and urban, and it's delivering projects throughout Queensland and northern New South Wales. So on the civil side of the business, it's R5, B4, 150 plus, which we're only over R3, B2, which limits your ability to do certain main roads projects and government projects. So it has the absolute highest rating you could get for a construction business. But originally, again, similar to us, it was focused on resources style clients. Obviously, with the activity on the East Coast in terms of infrastructure spend and commitment from the governments, really important platform for us to be able to pursue our growth ambitions on the East Coast. Majority of the clients are from Queensland Roads, Queensland Rail, other government departments, water boards, other things that we're working for at the moment, so very non-resources, again, giving us a really good balance for what we do in the West. And they're working at least the last 15 months on the RMS project in northern New South Wales as well, and getting a great outcome. So a really strong platform for us to actually be able to grow our ambitions on the East Coast, particularly with the buoyancy of the infrastructure market. So some of the larger opportunities we'll take on with them are either through existing JVs that are coming up or currently being developed. The Golding mining business is on 5 projects, has experienced pretty reasonable recent success. $730 million worth of new contracts have either been awarded or we've received extensions. So we've got $420 million at Baralaba, followed by a 3-year extension at Curragh, and most recently at Stanmore Coal. So again, in context, we paid $85 million for the business. It's already picked up $730 million worth of new work just in the mining business. The mining business is relatively capital light, slightly different model to how we've previously run. It has a combination of either client's equipment, its own equipment, or hire equipment, which it then operates and maintains. So the only new investment that we had to make to extend the life of the Curragh contract was a 600-tonne digger, albeit at $13 million. But that was the only commitment. So for 730 of new revenue, it's a pretty low capex model, which works well on the East Coast. Combined mining business across NRW now. And again, this is probably a surprise to some people who've forgotten how far the mining business has come. Combined mining business now runs 8 projects with a run rate of around 560 million per annum over multiple years across gold, lithium and coal. So the final part of the Golding business is urban, which, albeit relatively new to us in terms of our delivery, we hadn't been involved in it previously. It's essentially born out of a civil business. It's subdivisions, it's commercial subdivisions or residential subdivisions. This particular shot, Sunderland project at the Heights, was a bit unusual, driving around and looking at the size of the lots. Particularly, it was very, very small lots. In that particular development, you get a choice of a 2-storey or a 1-storey, and all the buildings look exactly the same. So I don't know how you find your way home, particularly when it's in a crop circle as well. But I couldn't see a for sale sign on the place, cars in the driveway, or they're all moved in. So it's been a really successful development for us. And a lot of that development, obviously particularly southeast Queensland markets been pretty hot and probably, not quite as strong as the Victorian market, but a real surprise to us when we bought the business. Uses no capital. It just uses, locals' rental equipment, and so a very capital light model. Really good business model, to be honest. Where we're working at the moment, there's 10 projects across various subdivisions. We're now, and they're all tier 1 clients, either listed or otherwise. And again, that business there particularly continues to be driven because of the cost of living closer to the CBDs, and also that migration. I mean, for $1 million, you sell your place in Sydney, you can get a whole lot for your $1 million in Queensland. So that's kind of pushing out and up, which is pretty interesting. So we think it's a pretty sustainable market going forward. So to summarise, we've got 40 projects around Australia with a pretty diverse exposure to clients and commodities. Very different to where we were at our peak last time around. Our positioning in our key markets, the Pilbara is obviously a key, as you've seen from some of the slides. It's further enhanced, I think, because of us winning South Flank. It's one of the earlier projects on the sustaining capital works. We get a chance to ramp up our workforce and mobilise quicker than anyone else. And again, we never shut that business off. We kept it there, we kept people there. I mean, we had project teams sitting in our office for months, wondering when they were going to be sent to a site. Good move, because those guys are now ready to deploy. They've been involved in bidding these projects, but they're also ready to deploy quicker than anyone else who's basically taken all that cost out of their business and then try to hire it. And one of the key themes, obviously, is labour escalation and availability of resources. I can tell you we're having no issue in terms of getting people for South Flank. And between ourselves and Golding, last time at the peak we had 5,000 people. 25% came from Queensland. Obviously Queensland is busy, New South Wales is busy. Overall mine production figures have continued to increase. So having the other business on the East Coast and the feeder pool of people or good project guys or engineers or anything else, we've got a much a much better group of individuals that we can work, so we need assistance in the west or east, we've got that flexibility. Onto the Golding acquisition. In summary, I mean, it's performing very well. As I said, our numbers will be out in a couple of weeks' time and you'll see for yourselves, but we're very pleased with the acquisition and the integration within the NRW group. The only guidance we have given is guiding the revenue to expect 40% growth in FY19 to around 1.1 billion. 950 million of that's already secured, so we're in a good place, obviously, at this particular point in the year. We see a pretty strong pipeline in terms of resources and infrastructure opportunities, probably for the next 5 years. You know, if you look at some of the sustaining timeline, infrastructure on the East Coast with Inland Rail, Cross River Rail, all the other things that are happening, yeah, there's actually a pretty buoyant pipeline ahead of us, and I think we're very well placed to participate in that. Strategic recruitment of particular roles in operations, and again, we've seen a lot of this stuff coming back up, particularly in the Pilbara. We've recruited ahead of the curve. We've made sure we've brought people in. So as soon as Southlank started, we had every single key position, we had every single project engineer. So a lot of that's been done. We've got more support in the operational areas, supporting our general managers. And that's a key step for us to make sure that we can manage that growth as we go forward over the next couple of years. One of the other things we recruited on the equipment technology side, and that's an area for us as a contractor, you know, with clients going autonomous or semi-autonomous or remote or whatever else. We obviously need to be aware of what's happening in the market. We've recruited an ex-senior executive from WestTrac to assist us with that and to look at where we can possibly add benefit in terms of, you know, not only safety but obviously productivity and efficiency into what we deliver for our clients. So that's a key placement as well. So lastly, there's opportunity for consolidation still. You know, a lot of our competitors have either, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but some of our competitors haven't made it. They've either gone into administration or been bought by other larger competitors, large offshore guys that have come in, wanted exposure to this space. But we think there's still a few interesting opportunities out there which we'll have a look at, you know, as long as they make sense for the business in terms of delivery capability and compelling enough in terms of returns. We've got a high benchmark with what we paid for Goldings, unfortunately, is sub 2 times, so we'll see how we go on the next one. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Sorry about the croaky voice. Hopefully it wasn't too painful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Our next presentation is from Ken Brinsden. He's Managing Director and CEO of Pilbara Minerals Limited. Ken is a